All right, guys, how you doing? So the question was winding in mire, right? And specifically what the hangings are, how the windings interoperate with that, and why Doplieren, Werkeren, all the various handworks and secondary strikes that seem like they should just be one of the windings aren't one of the windings for mire, right? That's the question. I think I have a solution to it, and so I'm going to go through with you on it. We're going to start first with the Unterhängen. I'm taking this specifically from basically the very end of part 2 of the longsword and also part 3 of the longsword, where he talks about windings in that section for just a brief period of time. Specifically, he tells us, what the Unterhängen is, and it's when you go up with your flat to catch a strike that you will then either snap around out of, do various actions with like wrenching, or specifically that you'll do the windings, and specifically the inward windings out of. So we're going to start with that, right? Because the first problem is that we disagree on what inward winding is a lot of times. So we'll imagine that, this gentleman is striking in at my head, and so I'm going to go up from below to parry. Now, I can end up there in a couple of different ways. I'll go up with uncrossed arms, just so I can look at you better here, and try and get this to play nice with me. So I go up and I catch on a hanging flat. Now, I'm not in hangen tort. I'm not extended forward with my edge, but I'm coming up and I'm catching on the flat, and specifically on the middle strong. So not on the strong, but on the middle portion of the blade that is also part of the strong, the middle strong. Okay, I'm going to catch it there, and then I'm going to wind in this case by turning my short edge in, over, as I strike with a step, whether it ends up being a cut, setting up for a thrust, what have you, right? But that's going to be our winding in, is this process of winding in. Now, Meyer notes that as we do this, we open ourselves up so that he might come and rush down on our opening, so we want to stay hard on the blade, and when that happens, we'll then wind out, okay? So winding in leads to a winding out. A Einwinden leads to Auswinden. They are paired together. So that sets us up for that. Okay, he gives us that one, it's explicit. But then the other hanging he gives us is the Einhängen, and that's the one where we have to make a certain interpretational call. So there are 3 ways that I could end up in Einhängen, one of which I think, well, 2 technically, are then going to be the Einhängen, right? So it comes from me attacking in. Now, we're going to kind of have to swap roles a little bit because my Pell can't get in the proper position, so bear with me on it. We'll start with the most basic one. I strike in, say, from above at his opening, and he parries with a Zornhau, Ort style Absetzen, Gerade Versetzung, whichever, right? He's going to create this crossing. Point up, pommel down, he's got an overbind. That's one option. Meyer doesn't specifically tell us that one. He does tell us, though, another one, and I'll do that one now. So the second one, we'll assume that this is attacking in at me, and Meyer says that you end up in Einhängen because as you strike in, he, the opponent, myself in this situation, responds with a Zwerk. Bam. So this puts the attacker, my Pell, in Einhängen at this point, right? Okay, so he's in an overbound position where I'm in a Zwerk, which is a type of Hängen. Meyer has this come into play otherwise. And then the third one, the third possibility for parrying this attack from above, I mean, it could be Schielhau, it could be a bunch of other things, but specifically for the various angles that are going to be created is the Unterhängen, right? That I get attacked from above, and so I go up and I catch with an Unterhängen against my attacker's blade, okay? So the 3 kind of geometries that can be formed. The first one is a Zorn on Zorn parry. Or the second two are basically a Unterhängen to either side, whether it ends up as a Zwerk to get us there, which could happen from either side, or just going up with the flat. But in either case, what we end up with is a position where my pommel is now up, my point is now down, right? Pommel up, point down. And so I think the windings specifically only happen from this geometry where one of the two people is in a point up, pommel down position in the bind, while the other is in a point down, pommel up position. So from here, I could wind over to attack my opponent and wind in, or he could choose to wind over at me as well, okay? So we get that kind of back and forth. So that then sets up what separates the windings from the Doplieren / Doplieren, right? Because if I attack in and he parries with this, right, the Geradeversetzung style parry, I actually, in this case, don't want to wind, right? I don't want to get here and hit the bind, linger for a second, and then go with my winding action, my Einwinden, because that's really going to open me up so hard in this scenario, okay? Versus here, I can wind, I have a lot more Fühlen as I'm going through. I can feel his motion. It's a bigger motion. I'm gonna get a response out of him as I start my action, right? If I've come up in a hanging parry and I start to wind over, I'm able to put my cross more easily in the way, woo, catch myself, wear your masks, and get there. So instead, it becomes a situation for handwork, Handarbeit, and secondary strikes. I want to strike that in, and in the moment of impact, indes, bam, turn and double the strike. 1, 2, as I come in and get my Doplieren, right? Bam, bam. Or end up, if he's a little stronger and tight on it, get the earlier Lichtenauer style, cutting behind the blade. Because of this geometry, it allows me to do it, and I want to be fast on it. Because his point is up, he can just fall right down upon me easily and directly. Similarly, right, I can end up in a bound situation and then do an Einwinden, right? Except that it's a reversing to control his blade, but effectively I've done an Einwinden that I can then turn out and work as well. So I would love to hear your feedback on this, those of you that are watching this video. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Please feel free to argue with me. Let's try and falsify this. Tell me why you think I'm wrong. Pull up examples. I've got my counter arguments, but I'd love to hear you try and pick it apart for me so that we can all be better. All right, guys, have a great one. Bye-bye.